G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day, and it's a Saturday morning here in Australia, so a Friday afternoon or maybe a Saturday morning by the time this goes up for some other people around the world. And I hope that you're having a fantastic weekend, taking a break, spend some time with family, have a beer, have a chicken palmy, whatever you like to do. So today we have a lot to go over, and I believe this is actually going to be one of the more important videos we do. We're going to talk about a very important radar system that's been hit and should have been hit, knowing what it does for ICBM nuclear weapons. We'll talk about ceasefires and what's going on in that space. They're not really allowed to talk about it for some reason, but we will bloody talk about it because we know at the end of this war, there's going to be security guarantees for both Ukraine and Russia put in place. Wherever that border lines up, there's going to be guarantees there, and we don't know what is actually going to happen there. We need to talk about the S-400 system. We need to look at Javelins. We'll look at Abrams. We will talk about bloody everything. Now, yesterday I put up a poll on I'm asking, does social media or do social media algorithms push certain people, ideas, voices more than others? And the overwhelming amount of people here, 95% of almost 1,400, said yes to this poll. Now, I voted yes to here, but I am still unsure of this. But I do think that social media plays a role not only in the informational space around warfare, but elections and all of that. And it will be very interesting to see in the future as more and more media comes off the mainstream onto socials and guys like myself, how that actually then influences. Now, speaking of YouTube and how some voices may be more suppressed than others, again, I'm not sure on this, but the YouTube algorithm, as far as I know, the number one metric for pushing a video to the top of the pile is the total watch time. So the percentage of that video watched. So if they watched 30%, is not going to push as much as if someone watches 80%, and then the comment. So as a YouTuber, and of course I have my own bias of you wanting to do this for many reasons, but if you want to help out a YouTuber, no, regardless of who it is, watching the full video potentially helps the algorithm more with the comments as well. But because of course, the more eyes are on a video for longer, but they're on YouTube, YouTube make more money. Therefore, the creator makes more money, but you can see how YouTube will influence that. Now, the notifications bell thing, I don't know. I get told every single day of my life, people are like, I've got it on, and I don't get any of it. Regardless, but I want to know your thoughts about, does social media algorithms influence some other than others? So let's talk about the biggest news of the day is a Russian S-400 system getting taken out. Now, there's still some speculation regarding what pages are on of, is this an S-400? Is this an S-300? Now, the majority of pages that I follow and see, both Russian and Ukrainian, are saying that this is an S-400, although some are still speculating S-300. But for the purpose of this, from what I've seen, the overwhelming majority, that this is an S-400. But you can see why in the informational sphere, people will want to say that it is an S-400, or on the other side say that it is an S-300, given how many of them and how expensive these are. But we can see it then firing off these interceptors here, and of course a drone watching this system. Now, why can the drone watch a system like this while it's trying to target interceptors? Why is the drone not being taken out? And we see this with many other systems, both in Ukraine, in occupied areas, and in Ukrainian territory as well, of all the drones floating overhead. The thing is with this, these drones, these are observation drones, and you only have so many missiles you can actually fire until this is basically just a truck sitting there with empty tubes and a radar. So you're going to strike what's about to kill you first, which is what is coming onto you. So what the radar can track is significantly more than what missiles are on board. So whether it's a Patriot or an S-400, an S-300, whatever, yeah, they'll see this drone in the air, but they're not going to waste one of these missiles to take out the drone while there are actual missiles coming in. So we can see and this coming, and I've seen many, and I'm on this side too, of why is this footage so heavily edited when it's probably some of Ukraine's best footage of this war. And then we can see the ATACMS, we presume ATACMS, airburst overhead here, and then we see the fireworks display show cooking off, then a S-400 battery here in spectacular fashion firing off. Now, many are saying, I can't confirm, but they are saying those 5 interceptors that were fired off in the beginning did hit the majority of them coming in, but eventually you're going to then be out of those. And this is footage coming out of the photographs that I showed you yesterday of this system destroyed on the ground. Now, one thing I will say about informational space is if we're getting footage of a system like this taken out within hours of photographs, video, whatever, well, this is far more important footage than if we saw the wreckage of an aircraft. So that brings in of why are we not seeing that footage when we are seeing this? But you can see massive blow up, and that is a big loss of a system like that, and successful targeting, obviously, of those attackers, which you know are harassing many areas. Now, what exactly has been hit in other areas, we're really not sure. How many of these does Russia have? Again, we're really not sure. If you go back to 2020 and look at some stuff, because after 2022 Feb, everything just becomes propaganda. But if you look at reports then, Russia was reported to have around 56 complete S-400 batteries, and some reports are saying now 8 to 15 have been completely destroyed. But still, Russia has considerable air defense power, and the S-500 system has been announced that it will be beginning combat deployment a few weeks ago. Now, could this raise potential issues for export of this system for countries buying it? Yeah, absolutely it could. And any weapons being used, whether from the West into Ukraine, from Russia on this war, could have an influence on the export market and countries wanting to buy or not buy that system. And there's definitely an effect there. Remember, war is a big business opportunity for people who make bloody weapons. Now, from my reading on this and some other information I've got, air defense systems, even when taken out, still capture a lot of valuable information that actually can help build future algorithms on what system actually hit it for in the future will be better. But I'm no air defense expert, and I guess most people around the world are not. Now, this is something that I really want to speak about, is this radar station that has been hit, said to be by Ukrainian long-range drones. Now, let's look at where this is located. So it's located right here. Let's zoom right out here, and we can see the distance away from Ukraine as well. Now, what is this? And we'll speak long about it. So this is in Armoured. This is a radar over-the-horizon long-range system for early warning of ICBMs, but ballistic missiles in general. Now, let's have a look at the damage and some things here. So we can see there is considerable damage to this. Again, no idea on how much damage this will actually have caused. Remember, these primarily are built for nuclear war. So everything here is going to be underground. I'll talk a bit more about that. But see this white panel on the front? That is where the radar will sit behind this, shine through for that. Now, that is an important thing to note on this then as well. So let's look in the direction that these are facing at. This is the white panel on these fronts. So we look at where that is facing out, and we can see that it may get some of Crimea, but it definitely gets the Black Sea and looks down into Turkey, Syria, these areas here. People have brought up, could this system be supplying information down in these areas as well? Now, like I said, the amount of damage on this, I don't actually know. We'll have a satellite imagery here as well. We see that there is that the day before, and then we can see the damage here. Now, like I said, this facility will be primarily underground, but within this building, there will be a big radar behind in that panel with a hell of a lot of electrical equipment. Now, this is somewhat a newer version of what we see, say, in Chernobyl, with then the big array. But of course, this is a much older variant. Now, I know very little about over-the-horizon radar, but what I do know is that Australia is a world leader in this space as well. But what I do know is the operators of this system, firstly, they have a very cool patch, but secondly, they work in a completely blacked out room in a bunker below the ground, and all have top secret clearances. So obviously very important areas. They tell you a lot about it. But what these are there to do is primarily, at least, they can do other actions, but detect ballistic missiles. And it's part of a country's early warning system and systems of information that relay to command, to ships, to missile batteries, and of course, other than nuclear facilities and deterrence facilities too. So this basically tracks ICBM missiles off the ground. So let's have a look at this. And again, I can't confirm all of this, but you can see where people are saying this radar primarily covers. And you can see that it covers just the south of Ukraine into the majority of NATO, but as well over areas such as Crimea, but not that much of Ukraine. Let's have a look at this one. This shows a little bit better of the three-dimensional element of how this works, but of course lifts up for the horizon, the curvature of the Earth, which may not exist or not, but you can see where these systems may be on that layered defense of when these ICBMs are up in the atmosphere, then returning on their ballistic phase. Now, from what we know is very, very limited, but people are saying this likely has very little or no influence in Ukraine. It's 500 kilometers from Crimea, and some say that it can't see anything below 20 kilometers due to the curvature of the Earth and also due to how the system then works. But those saying it definitely does detect things like ATACMS, trust me, it may or it may not. There's probably 100 people in the world, and that could be generous, who could definitively actually tell you if this can or cannot provide battlefield information in Ukraine with the weapons that we are seeing used. And trust me, we are not those people here on YouTube. We have another image here as well, so you can see where these are then being used, the directional aspect of them, and the curvature off the Earth as well. But this to me does ring warning bells in my brain to not fuck with other countries' nuclear warning systems in a non-nuclear war, especially if it has little to no effect. And by these maps, we can see that it may not even on the coverage there. And I think the benefit to this, to risk ratio, is far outweighed. Like what influence is it actually having in Ukraine versus the risk of a strike like this. Now, again, I'm not sitting in a bunker somewhere with a top secret clearance. Maybe it has a lot, but these people saying it does or it doesn't on Twitter, on Telegram, on YouTube, trust me, we do not bloody know. But people are speculating, is this shaping the battle space for future actions, which of course people will read into, and I think that can be see escalation from there. And personally, I believe that it is in everyone's interest that all nuclear powers detection systems are in the best possible order, that these weapons actually protect more people and have saved more lives around the world than they have actually taken so far. So, and I think the backfire for Ukraine here could be, do strikes like this further influence the US decision to not lift restrictions on Ukraine having full use of weapons inside of Russia? I think that's where that backfire could be there. But look, the last thing I want to say on this is these are important systems. These are, of course, part of Russia's like umbrella of nuclear capability weapons, as well as deterrence and warning systems as well. How influential are they in Ukraine? We don't know. We know that so we really don't know. But I think that we could be tiptoeing down a line here we may not want to go down, even from open source information. And Ukraine has been very open that, you know, they really want US weapons to strike within Russia. They have permission to do that. And I think this could actually turn decisions like that away because, well, holy shit, do we want you hitting these? Will Russia see this as a shaping of the battle space and change things? I don't know, but I completely agree that Ukraine should be able to strike within Russia. And I think that there are far better targets to strike within Russia than that will have more influence straight onto either the battlefield or the economy. But I don't know. I'm just a bloody YouTuber. Now let's talk about this. I saw Ukrainian pages sharing this, and I don't know much more than this. But this is said to be a Russian telegram. A number of media outlets and military officials reporting the opening of the Dnipro hydroelectric power station. 4 airlocks in station are open. A powerful discharge of water is underway. The enemy's release of water is possible due to the successful actions of our troops in the island zone of Kherson region. So potentially a flood down the Dnipro here. Now I haven't seen anything of that. But, of course, we had now Novokhovka down here where we saw that dam blow and then flood these areas. And people are saying up here, we don't know. Hadar, this is the nuclear power station here too. So, again, interesting, but I haven't seen like any visual of that. But I just thought it was interesting to then speak about. Now, let's talk about ceasefire before we have a look at some tanks, some javelins, and whatever. I believe this is important to speak about too. So Reuters had like an exclusive interview with anonymous sources here that Russian President Vladimir Putin is ready to halt the war in Ukraine with a negotiated ceasefire that recognizes the current battlefield lines. So this is the current battlefield lines here, recognizes this as a new border, and it would be then have to be internationally recognized, and a seize of ground there. So Ukraine has lost a lot of its south, a fair bit of its east, about 18 to 20%. So it would definitely have a large effect here, as well as, of course, Crimea, strategically the most important area for Russia, and to have both the southern and northern connect into here. Let's continue. 3 of the sources familiar with discussions on Putin's entourage said the veteran Russian leader had expressed frustration to a small group of advisors about what he views as Western-backed attempts to stymie negotiations and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's decision to rule out talks. So we know the West has a lot of influence on what Ukraine does next. If they don't send weapons, Ukraine's going to have to be forced to do something. If they do, then they could be forced wherever. We know the hand can be forced, as well as paying salaries, all of this. So people have spoken out against, is the West having a lot of influence on Ukraine there, as well as we do see that Ukraine is saying, no, we want to clear the rest of the territory. Now, one of them has said, Putin can fight for as long as it takes, but Putin is also ready for a ceasefire to freeze the war. So we'll speak more on this and how that is then going here. Asked about Reuters' report at a news conference in Belarus on Friday, Putin said talks should restart. Let them resume, adding the negotiations should be based on the realities on the ground and on a plan agreed during previous summit to reach a deal the first weeks of the war, not on the basis of what one side wants. So let's look. What is the reality on the ground? Well, Russia occupy 18 to 20% of Ukrainian land, and they are advancing on the battlefield. They have a numerical advantage of shells and troops, but they have the Russian economy behind it, which is shifting, but is much smaller than NATO's combined economy military power, then pushing into Ukraine as well. That is the reality on the ground at the moment. And like he's saying, that we need to take into account the reality on the ground, not what one side wants, as a beginning for that. And that I've spoken about the 10-point peace plan, that if it is a full Russian withdrawal and the full 1991 borders, the only way to do that is either have Russia so economically broken apart that they have to have a withdrawal, or a tactical military strategic push through these areas, which, you know, many will question, and many, including myself, will say, I think the plan was to sanction Russia so hard that they had to withdraw rather than to push so many weapons in, that Ukraine would have a military victory over that it would be a combined effort rather than just one-on-one. And the Russian economy has been far more resilient than previously expected. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said on Twitter that the Russian leader was trying to derail a Ukrainian-initiated peace summit in Switzerland. And we've seen many of these, but again, Russia's not coming to this summit. China may or not be. We don't exactly know yet, but saying send out phony signals. But again, this peace summit in Switzerland is starting on the basis of the 10-point peace plan. Due to the current realities on the ground, I'm sorry, but that is unrealistic without a military victory that is going to take hundreds of billions of dollars more and more troops. Now, is that possible? Potentially. But again, I think the peace summit isn't a peace summit. It's a rallying support summit. If you don't have the countries involved in this at the table, and you're taking into account if we're starting at this area, we're starting here on the negotiation down. It's followed sustained battlefield pressure and territorial advances by Russia in recent weeks. However, sources said that Putin, re-elected in March for a 6-year term, would rather use Russia's current momentum to put the war behind him. They did not directly comment on the new defense minister. Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, in response to a request for comment, said the country did not want eternal war. Based on the knowledge of conversations in the upper ranks of the Kremlin, 2 of the sources said Putin was of the view that the gains of the war so far were enough to sell a victory to the Russian people. Of course, we know Russia's had high losses in this. It's affected the economy. It's affected where people can travel. But can you sell a victory there? 3 sources said Putin understood any dramatic new advances would require another nationwide mobilization, which he did not want. Of course, any mobilization is very, very unpopular. Ukraine's going through that right now. Zelensky has repeatedly said peace on Putin's terms is a non-starter. He has vowed to retake lost territory, including Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014. He signed a decree in 2022 that formally declared any talks with Putin impossible. One of the sources predicted no agreement could happen while Zelensky was in power unless Russia bypassed him and struck a deal with Washington. And I think this could happen somewhere and undermine that. I don't know, but I think that could be realistic. We don't know where this war goes. The Swiss Peace Summit in June is aimed at unifying international opinion on how to end the war. The talks were convened at the initiative of Zelensky, who has said Putin should not attend. Switzerland has not invited Russia, although they do want China to attend. We know China is the biggest unknown in this war of lethal support, intelligence support, and how that war would change if China had more involvement there. But can China lean on Russia a little bit? Speaking of China, May 17, Putin said Ukraine may use Swiss peace talks to get a broader group of countries to back Zelensky. Zelensky's demand for a total Russian withdrawal, which Putin said would be an imposed condition rather than a serious peace negotiation. That's what we talk about. If you're starting at Russian withdrawal 91 in borders, that is a imposed condition rather than a peace negotiation. I think we need thesauruses on what negotiation looks like, given what he says in the beginning here of the realities on the ground, not on the basis of what one side then wants. So that is, like I've said, if it is Russia's advancing, they occupy areas, they have numerical advantage of troops and weapons and moving on the front line, but you go to the board with, full withdrawal and this border, that's not taking into account the current realities on the ground. Now, what will the future realities be on the ground? We don't know. Maybe we will see a big sweep across from Ukraine the other way as well. We don't know. But if you're having a negotiation now, it needs to take in the realities of now. I'd like $1 million to sell my house for, but the reality of the market is, well, it's actually the Australian market, you never bloody know. But the reality of the market is I'm not going to get that, even if that's my point of what I then want. So we have one final slide here. Putin's insistence on locking in any battlefield gains in a deal is non-negotiable. All of the sources suggest Putin will say that we won, that NATO attacked us and we kept our sovereignty, that we have a land corridor to Crimea, which is true on that land corridor. Freezing conflict along current lines would leave Russia in possession of substantial chunks of 4 Ukrainian regions he formally incorporated into Russia 22, but without full control of any of them. Now, what we do know is if this froze like this, that if Ukraine then wanted to join NATO, EU, now of course that will be in the negotiation process as well, but imagine this, Ukraine would have to forego these territories then for those entry from my reading of the requirements. It may not be a written requirement, but from the in between the lines, that's what people are saying with ongoing border tensions too. And the ongoing border tensions between some countries may be different than if you have a border tension with a nuclear power, especially the one of which NATO is there to counter. So that is interesting there too. So it's a massive, massive decision. Another factor playing into the Kremlin's chief's view that a war should end is the longer it drags on, the more battle-hardened veterans return to Russia, dissatisfied with the post-war job and income prospects, potentially creating tensions in society, said one of the sources who has worked with Putin. Now, again, this is going to be both ways. You're getting guys coming off the front line unhappy with how things are then going and potentially called up to go back as well. In Feb, 3 Russian sources told Reuters the United States rejected a previous Putin suggestion of a ceasefire to freeze the war. In absence of a ceasefire, Putin wants to take as much territory as possible to ratchet up pressure on Ukraine while seeking to exploit unexpected opportunities to acquire more. Russian forces control a total of about 18% of Ukraine, saying that Russia will push further, that Putin will slowly conquer territories until Zelensky comes up with an offer to stop. The US and European leaders have said that they would stand by Ukraine until its security sovereignty is guaranteed, so that border, saying Russia could end the war at any time by withdrawing its forces from Ukraine. But as well, like I speak about, we need to look at the reality of what is happening. Can Ukraine have the military power to push down through areas like Crimea, Donetsk? We have not seen any example yet of fighting in areas this built up where the population will not potentially be on your side, that has been boarded up and has been behind all these fortifications now, some areas for years, some areas for 10 years. How is this looking? And again, this is what annoys me. is we need to look at what is actually happening on the ground. If you're going to have a peace summit, a negotiation, whatever, it can't take into account what we want. It needs to take into account of what is actually happening, what is actually coming in that will maybe flip the tide then on this. But I thought that was very interesting to look at and interesting to look at where people are going. Now, we're seeing a lot of footage of javelins being used, and we saw for a long time not much footage of jabs being used. So you'll see here, this is the clue that he's looking down, and then you'll see the first and second stage, second stage, and then it's off, and that is then top attack. So that one has gone straight up, and then you can see it dipping back down here, and then I don't know if you'll actually see the hit, but that is in top, yep, there you go, top attack mode. You can also direct attack on the little bloody joysticky things. Now, we have seen it. We have seen it, the first cope cage on a Abrams tank. Now, cope cage, I hate the word cope cage because if it works, if it looks silly but it works, it bloody works. We see Merkavas with Merkava 4s, potentially the best tank in the world with them. It's not silly if it works. 47th Mech Brigade with Contact 1 dynamic protection armor, so the very older Contact armor. This won't do anything against multi-stage shaped charges on the front hull. And of course, then that that top cope cage on here. Let's have a look at some of the photographs on here too. You can actually see that this is hinged in areas as well to then work on the tank for maintenance. You can see this welded on, and this will, you know, like it or not, you can see the hinge here, will have an influence on drones and dropped munitions and bits and pieces like this. But what we're waiting for is a house on top of one. But that is interesting to look at. Now let's look at some targets, then we'll look at the maps. I know this video is getting on. So this is at the Kushkivskaya airfield here, where we have seen from an attack some Russian planes taken out, said to be by Ukrainian drones. So this one here, this is a Su-27 that has been taken out. Now we do see then a that's the Su-27. Then we do see a Su-34 and said to have some damage there. Again, not exactly sure on that. And then, of course, the other aircraft leaving from here. So we do see the Su-34 may be damaged, and we see the Su-27, and then potentially a Su-30 damaged as well, but that one's more unknown on there too. So more attacks here. Now let's have a look at the maps. Let's have a look at see what's changing. I know, apologies, I didn't plan to this at the end, but that's what has happened. So no changes up in here, but we do know Ukraine has deployed extra forces in here and has got some control back in Vovchansk. We are hearing rumors too of more targeting at crossing points here. Again, limited of what's coming out of here. Kislivka up here. This is what we saw last week, that we did see this map updating that Russia was making some ground in here. Then let's have a look on the Syriac map of this area. And we have Ivanivka here. So this is that red dot. Northeastern front, Russian army made new advances north of Kislivka and entered the first houses here. So closing up this territory here. Again, not sure, but we did hear that there will be more pushes up in this direction, in the direction of Kupiansk. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there. We come just south, so we were just here, come just south into Berestove here. No change on this map again, but let's have a look just here, and we can see that it is showing some change on then the Syriac map out towards here. During the last week, Russian army managed to capture most of the locality of Berestove. So saying they've captured this, but again, we're not 100% sure. Difficult to line up where things are, but said that there is some movement here too. Now, where are we going to next? Let's go then to Terni. So easiest way to look for Terni is look for these then reservoirs here. Terni, now no change shown on this map, but said to be a Ukrainian advancement here north of Donetsk. During the last days, Ukrainian army retook positions southeast of Yampalivka. So we see where these then tree lines are. These are these two, saying just in where my cursor is, Ukraine took back some positions in here. Now let's come down. No change in Belorivka, no change in Rozdilivka where we commented yesterday. Then we see this. Kislivka showing what Syriac showed, I believe, 2 days ago of a Russian advancement through then this area here to line up those. Now we come then onto the Syriac, and he's then showing this, but in a different area. So this dot right here, that is Kislivka, and then Ivanovsky just above. The easiest way to line up on this, is we just zoom in one more, is to try and line up where different tree lines and roads are. So let's have a look. This is the rail. This is the rail, and then we're talking just this paddock here. Russian army begun advancing south of Ivanovsky. On the other hand, the situation around Kislivka was clarified. The southern height is contested or under Ukrainian control. The same happened with the further houses. So some changes in Klishivka, but a Russian advancement up on that front. Now, let's have a look further down into Ulmansk as well. Now, we can see this map is showing now what Noel Reports was sort of saying around now full control of this settlement here as well as a close up here. We know from geolocated footage yesterday that Russia did break into where this tree line joins up there. I would say there has to be a withdrawal back across this waterway at some point, as well as Ulmansk. We know from geolocated footage that this was 2 weeks ago. There's definitely Russian forces around Ulmansk here, as well as other Ukrainian maps, but your deep state map is showing, at least it's showing a gain in this direction here. We know it should be more of a sausage out around here. Let's have a look then, and that is taking into account Ukrainian maps too. Let's take into account, let's have a look at then the Suryak here. So this dot, this is Ulmansk here. So of course showing much more control. See this funny shaped paddock, so control right up through here, very similar to what Noel Reports are saying. Capture of Ulmansk, Russian army captured the southern forest belt into this area, closing up a gap in here. So that is sort of what we presumed that this map would be trickling through, and no change in Robotny holds. Legends, sorry if this one was a little bit all over the place. I should have done some bits earlier than others. Regardless, have a great weekend, have a great day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Cheers.